Hello everybody and welcome to Astrology. My name's Samuel and I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine, and I'm doing a different talk today which is a little bit different from the normal astro stuff I've been talking about, but there'll be astrological relevance to this from a medical astrology point of view. But I am going to talk primarily based on an article I wrote on the gallbladder health, well-being, and it was titled Chinese Medicine Essences and Astrological Considerations in Connection to Gallbladder Health. Because recently in clinic, I just have seen a lot of gallbladder patterns and gallbladder pathology, so to speak. Now, this is a little disclaimer here. None of this is medical advice. This is if you want to take it as entertainment purposes or educational purposes, there's no substitute for seeing a qualified practitioner. So just want to state that clearly. That's very important. And so what I wanted to talk about is recently I had a lot of patients with gallstones come into my clinic, and I think the gallbladder meridian in Chinese medicine is one of the most fascinating. It's one of the largest channels, has a very interesting pathway, and it's connected to what they call, it's one of the curious fu in Chinese medicine, and so it has a very strong link to the brain, which I think, as there's an influential point on the gallbladder channel called the influential point of marrow, and the C of marrow is actually the brain. So there's a strong connection to the brain and the brain chemistry, and it has a very powerful effect on the psyche, I would say, the gallbladder, and particularly when it comes to making life transitions, major life transitions, which require an element of being stable within yourself enough to make a stable, clear, coherent decision and have the courage to actually make that decision. And when people usually do not have the courage to change or make a major life transition, usually we would say in Chinese medicine, there's a saying in Chinese, they call it Dan Xiao Gui, and there is a connection to that is basically saying, that's where we get the saying, or the saying where you get cold feet. Literally, a gallbladder pattern can manifest in the body as someone having cold feet and afraid to make major life decisions. That mean making a commitment to something, excuse me, a major change, a major life transition, and some people may get an opportunity and then not know which way to decide. But if our gallbladder is coherent, and wood element, because it's connected to the wood element from a 5-element perspective, if the wood element is balanced and functional, then we won't have a problem making that decision. Now, it's interesting, in Chinese astrology, we will connect the wood element to the planet Jupiter, and Jupiter is all about excesses. So obviously when we overindulge in things like this, the gallbladder can suffer, right? Especially from excessive, a lousy diet, this kind of thing. And they're the basics that can really affect the gallbladder. And so it's a very interesting dynamic what can go on. But on the psyche level, right, can get extremely deep, because there's certain channels that we look at in Chinese medicine, not just the primary meridians. Actually, I think there's a group of channels, what they call low channels, which are basically used by using the mediumship of blood. We've got to understand too, for you guys probably don't know this, but this is Chinese medical kind of terms. The body stores things at different levels. And this is one of the most fascinating things I found in Chinese medicine, because the body's wisdom is amazing. And the reason the body in Chinese medicine, right, sometimes pathology will get stored in the skin. This is when we get the eczema and psoriasis, things like this. It can get stored in the blood. And this is what we call the low channels, use the mediumship of blood. So sometimes you can see the spider nevi veins, those little purple thin veins. They're connected to, that's what they call fullness of the low channel. And usually in Chinese medicine, we'll prick and bleed these. There's a certain sequence we'll use. Obviously, we'll open low channels on the meridians and things like this. But so we'll open them up, usually using this. And the low channels, of course, blood is deeply connected to trauma and the psyche. So this is why we would do these kind of treatments in Chinese medicine, because when we're working on the psychological level, ultimately we want to use the mediumship of blood. And that's a massive subject, that one. And obviously I think I did another video on that on my channel somewhere. I might throw it in at the end titles there, maybe put a few links into that one, but obviously I haven't done one on that, but on the bloodletting, so to speak. But it's one of the major things we will consider in Chinese medicine for psychological problems. We'll do some bloodletting because blood holds trauma, and you can clear the trauma. And that's why a lot of people, when they self-harm, they will ultimately do that, because obviously the blood holds trauma and they feel better after doing it. It's not the most elegant way of doing it, but that's what most people do. And I've seen that a lot when I worked in certain drug and alcohol rehab centers, and also doing some volunteer work in places from people who had a lot of disadvantaged backgrounds and a lot of kind of psych problems. So anyway, I'm kind of going on a different channel here, but I just wanted to throw that in just to show that how multidimensional actually Chinese medicine actually is. And there's a saying in Chinese medicine, all disease is rooted in the spirit. So there's a lot of real deep wisdom in the ancient Chinese, and this is why they had their divinations arts like the I Ching. They used Bazi, and there's another form of astrology they call Ziwei as well. And this is why me as a practitioner, I always consult using really astrology for my patients who really need it, is because, you know, when they say all disease is rooted in the spirit, then we need a mechanism or a tool or a divination art that's going to allow us to be able to tap in to see the kind of invisible. And I think astrology really does that amazingly. Now, so, and like I said, I did mention the gallbladder as part of the curious foo, which is awesome. And I've noticed too that a lot of people, interestingly enough, have had gallbladders removed in for whatever reason medically. I've seen a lot of people end up with bipolar. So, and this is why the connection, I personally think, is really important, because of that gallbladder's connection to the brain. And and we've got to understand, when we talk about Jing essence in the marrow, which is the brain, and which is how it lodged in the marrow of the bone, is what they call the DNA. DNA and RNA is what the ancient Chinese would call Jing, an essence, right? Now, there's really cool things in regards to, obviously, I found on a psych level, when people were having gallbladder problems, that especially in connection to what they call the emptiness of the low channel in the gallbladder channel, there can be extreme kind of introversion and loss of motivation and severe depression, or a feeling like there's no place to go. The Taoists would call this kind of syndrome the wandering corpse. It's meant when the Shen and the spirit is really absent, and there can be suicidal tendencies, right? So this is really amazing, because one of the key cell salts, and I've done this, for those who don't know, I've done the cell salt series on my channel, and one of the key salts I prescribe for gallbladder patterns will be Nat Sulf. And one of the key indications of Nat Solf is for those who do have suicidal tendencies, and it's in connection to do with the bile. And bile's a whole other a different thing. I mean, in the ancient medical world, they talk about different colors and or different types of biles. In Chinese medicine, we tend to call that phlegm or dampness, more so phlegm. But I'm trying not to get too Chinese medical at the moment, but it's interesting to note. So with gallbladder patterns and gallbladder problems, I will usually prescribe as, especially for stones, will be Nat Sulph, and of course Nat Phos is another key one to breaking up crystallizations in the body. Now, like I was saying before, the gallbladder is connected to the wood element, which is ruled by the planet Jupiter, and Jupiter is the planet of excesses. So, and usually we have these problems from overindulging in things, and mainly to do with food or fatty foods and things like this. But from a Chinese medical point of view, when it comes to stones, right, the gallbladder stores bile and then obviously secretes it for digestive reasons. But when we talk about how stones are formed, in Chinese medicine, the liver and gallbladder are yin and yang pair organs. So the liver's yin, the gallbladder's yang. And the liver, when we suffer, when we repress a lot of emotions and don't express them, then it generates a lot of heat and fire, which can disturb the spirit, because wood generates fire, so it can disturb the heart. But then also it can cook the bile. So the gallbladder is really prone to damp heat. So when that qi stagnation's there from emotional repression, unexpressed emotion, or having long-term emotional problems, it generates heat, and then the bile in the gallbladder eventually cooks and then crystallizes, and that's how it forms a stone. So I just wanted to say that because it's very interesting how this happens, and primarily a lot of the time in Chinese medicine, this is how things really do manifest. A lot of it is from emotion, which is connected to all of the Zhang Fu, which is the organs. And so, and of course, repressed emotion is also going to derange the psyche or the mind. So a lot of mental health problems will come most likely from what Wilhelm Reich coined the emotional plague. So something for you guys to mull over. And if you don't know much about that, then check out Reich's work, because it's amazing on that level. But so from an astrological point of view, from a planetary astrological point of view, the gallbladder is ruled by the two malefics, right? Rule the gallbladder was Saturn and Mars. And so they're connected to the signs of Capricorn and Scorpio. And so the energetics of Saturn is cold, and the energetics of Mars is really hot. So, and obviously these planets can be troublesome in a chart, but this will depend on obviously the sect you're born under, whether your chart is nocturnal or diurnal. So that's another thing that I just throw in there, but it's more getting more technical astrologically. But the so it's no wonder, though, that the gallbladder is really affected by the planet Saturn, because Saturn causes delays, it restricts, it restrains, and generally slows down anything it touches, right? And getting back to Mars represents fire, right? As well. So Saturn, if we're really repressing, and this is what Saturn will do, it'll help our emotions be contained, and a lot won't be able to be expressed so well, particularly if we've got a Saturn moon aspect. But, and then of course, and then if we've got the problems with obviously the anger management, which is more connected to Mars, the fire element, then it doesn't stand to reason that eventually those stones will end up crystallizing and cooking, affecting the psyche, and then we have problems on that level. Now, I've treated quite a lot of patients, and like I said, the key salts for those of you who do have these kind of problems, I mean, obviously my most important point of call will be, as a practitioner, I'm an acupuncturist, so I do acupuncture, and acupuncture is amazing for this thing, especially for the pain management. And for those who don't know, gallbladder time from the meridian clock is between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. So that's why a lot of the times when we're lying in bed, then the gallbladder peaks, right? When we have pain or stagnation, the pain really starts coming on. And so the first protocol for people are high doses of Nat Sulph and Nat Phos. They're amazing for this. Really, really important, and help you. Really, really important as a maintenance dose. There's also obviously the Chinese formula, which I don't know, for those Chinese med practitioners listening to that, I always use Da Chai Hu Tang, a variation, right? And I'll throw in some other different herbs, obviously, to assist with the stones. It's really important. And I've noticed using this in this protocol I usually use in clinic would be the acupuncture, that herb formula, Da Chai Hu Tang, the cell salts as a maintenance, and then of course, if you want to dig deeper, and because I'm in Australia, and I know a lot of my audience actually is in the US, but I use a lot of the Australian bush flower essences, and there's some very, very key ones I use because I think it's always important to take it to another level. And you guys know, if you guys are practitioners of astrology and things like this, then I always look at the balance of elements in charts, right? If someone has a lot of water element in their chart, they really do benefit from essences or a very strong Piscean or Neptunian signature in their chart. They're more refined and they're extremely sensitive. So I'll throw in... I will always use essences, and so the flower essence I used for these were Dagger Hakea, which is one to do with resentment, which a lot of gallbladder problems can be, and of course Red Grevillea, because Red Grevillea is a great essence for liver qi stagnation, and one's feeling stuck in life and gives the courage to leave uncomfortable situations. Because I think when a lot of people are in stasis, right, and can't make a major decision, a commitment of some kind, then what do? You stay in stagnation. And rightly so. When you make the courage to have a decision and have faith in yourself, enough self-esteem and fortitude to be able to have the courage to make the change, then things work out for you better, obviously, on that level. But Dagger Hakea as a flower essence is one of the key ones for resentment and bitterness, particularly when it comes to close families and members and lovers. And it's one of the key ones for gallbladder pathology, in my opinion. And of course, Red Grevillea. Red Grevillea is very good for the stuck liver qi when you're feeling stuck and wanting to move that liver qi energy. And I think it's really, really important to do that. And of course, the liver has that function in Chinese medicine of wants to spread energy, wants to spread qi all over the body, right? It spreads, they call it, liver has a function of spreading the free flow of qi. And so when we're pent up and we're feeling stuck and constrained, which is very common in Western society, right? A lot of us are stressed. A lot of us feel rushed, impatient. Got to go here, got to there. It aggravates the liver. We feel under pressure. We can feel caged. We can feel stuck. And when, obviously, one of the patterns of liver qi stagnation is claustrophobia. When people get really claustrophobic, the liver is extremely stuck. And another way to think about things as well is, particularly with the wood element, is the fluid of the liver's the tears. So people who get very teary, or it happens a lot after acupuncture, or even having essences, or I've noticed actually recently the people I've had with the gallbladder, and these people have had not just these are more my gallbladder cases clinically have been the people who've actually had physical stones and waking up in pain. But they've noticed too, after they've had, I've given them this protocol that I usually give them with the acupuncture, that herb formula, the salts and the essences, is huge emotional releases from this, and a lot of crying and a lot of pain and sadness coming up, which is actually a good thing, because usually when the liver starts to free up and open up, then it releases the stagnation within our cells, our psyches, and the body. Things start to free up. But of course, to process the shadow of the psyche, the darkness needs to surface, right? We need to revisit that pain and acknowledge it, because really all shadow work is nothing really magical. It's just feeling emotion and allowing it to come on and process it. And I think probably that's why Arthur Yanos' book, The Primal Scream, is one of the best ones you can read to understand that. And but also I'd say too that after doing that protocol, then of course there's a gallbladder flush protocol I use and tell people to do, which has worked extremely well. But of course you've got to understand the size of the stones as well, so you've got to be careful. Usually, as a rule, if the stones are under 1 centimeter, then in Chinese medicine I can really work with that, and it's quite safe. So anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit about that. This is a little bit of a different talk on the medical lines, but I think anyone who is suffering from these patterns, particularly gallbladder patterns, the physical stones as well as the psychological ones, then really go for it and have acupuncture, Chinese medicine, herbal medicine. And of course, if you don't have access to that, then definitely use the cell salts. The cell salts are amazing, but you need to have very big doses. And I'll talk a little bit more about that soon coming up. And then also we have got the Sagittarius full moon to look forward to this weekend, which is this will be a different moon from the last one, I'll tell you, from the last one in Scorpio. So strap yourselves in for that one, guys. And thanks for listening, and we'll be in touch soon.